Welcome, Facebook fans of Gay USA. We're here.
We are, but you're not going to get to see us for about a minute and a half.
Just use your imaginations.
Maybe it's a blessing not to see us. Maybe we should do the whole show like this.
Could do a radio show. Well,
we almost do.
Well, except we have added lots of pictures over the last years.
It's true.
We didn't used to do that as much.
Yeah, but now we like to think we're a TV show, so we put up pictures.
No video this week, though.
No. Almost, but not quite. And we have the usual overstuffed show of bad news and good news.
My favorite video of the week was, I think it was Justin Jones getting off a plane that he was on with Joan Baez. Did you see this?
No.
They were on the same plane. They get into the terminal and he says, "Let's sing We Shall Overcome Together." And they do.
I did see that, but I didn't realize he was singing with Joan Baez.
Yeah. And they sang another song too. But
I'm sorry
touching.
I missed that. I'll have to look that up.
Quite touching. I heard about it, and then I saw it on, somebody posted it on Instagram.
All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. I'm looking much smaller than you. I'm going to adjust my screen there. There we go.
All right. And boy, do we have a lot of news. This was the week that the Biden administration issued its guidance on transgender students in school sports and divided the community.
And the Supreme Court, which loves to surprise us these days, rejected an attempt by West Virginia to stop the 12-year-old trans girl from participating on her school's cross-country team.
A federal judge rejected a suit by a Christian teacher who wanted the right not to treat trans students with respect.
And the anti-abortion activist judge who banned abortion pills invoked the unconstitutional 19th century Comstock Act.
More anti-LGBTQ legislation to tell you about in Arkansas, North Dakota, Missouri, and Florida.
But very heartening this week to see the pictures of activists in San Francisco and West Hollywood out in the streets, dragging up and fighting back.
With the Equality Act stalled in Congress, the lobby group, Freedom for All Americans, dissolves.
No, we need to be out in the streets. Chicago's new city council will have 9 LGBTQ members.
This week, we're going to remember a pioneering Indian chef and author, a trailblazing transgender activist in Pittsburgh and on Long Island, and a prominent British countertenor.
And we're all waiting on biting our nails about whether Uganda's president is going to sign the heinous anti-gay bill, despite objections from around the world.
Where he could make things go from bad to worse. Mm-hmm. And Monique comes out on her comedy special.
I watched it. I can fill in all the details.
So how about that, Joe Biden? His education department proposed a federal rule change that will allow schools to enforce some restrictions on trans student athletes, but opposes policies that categorically ban them from participating on sports teams consistent with their gender identity. The rule recognizes that in some instances, particularly in competitive high school and college athletic environments, some schools may limit transgender student participation to ensure fairness and competition and safety. There's a 30-day comment period on this. Now, somebody like Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota immediately said, "You're not going to impose this on us." But LGBT groups are concerned as well in some cases. Lambda is concerned about whether the rule will hinder efforts to end discrimination against trans students.
This would be an amendment to Title IX, which prohibits sex discrimination in sports, school sports, and has been interpreted variously over the last few years, but particularly to ban discrimination against trans kids in school sports. So the Biden administration is trying to split the baby here and get rid of these statewide bans on trans youth participation in school sports and say all those laws that you've passed in these states are bad and inappropriate. They're too much a blanket ban. That's going to be illegal. We're going to outlaw those statewide bans on all trans youth participation in sports. But we recognize that perhaps this is not a solution to just get rid of all of it. There may be cases individually where it is appropriate to assess whether a particular person is inappropriate in sports in their lived gender, their gender identity. So we'll allow leeway for that. Well, as you say, Andy, it's satisfied no one, which unfortunately is what people often say is that makes it a great solution because everybody's mad at us. But I don't know that that's the answer here.
Well, 14 trans and non-binary legislators wrote to Biden with their concerns, and they want revisions. There were some trans leaders, legal leaders, who affirmed it. I have to think they had a hand in writing it, that the administration would not have not consulted anybody about this within the trans community. But that has not, again, it doesn't satisfy everybody.
Well, I think we would have to say that the Biden administration thinks it is doing the right thing, that they set out to do something that they thought would be a good thing. But the problem is that you can set out to do a good thing and the right wing can still exploit it, manipulate it, twist it, and end up in the same bad place that they began in. This by leaving that leeway, it is a potential opportunity for abuse. So it's a tough call.
A lot of this is going to be left up to, unless there are court interventions, the sports bodies that regulate them, whether, especially for college athletics and things like that, about deciding who could play and who can't.
And they've already split on some of this sport by sport in the rules that they have. But there are a lot of trans activists who are really up in arms about this and very offended and say, look, either we are who we are or we're not. And you can't just start putting us in some separate category and assessing us. Cisgender people have a variety of characteristics and skills and body types, and you don't separate them. You simply say everybody can play by their abilities. So there's a lot to be said for that point of view. So I think the Biden administration thought it was going to have an easier time with this, but in fact, they're getting attacked from all sides for it. And so this is not going to be the last word. And
there is, as I said, a 30-day comment period. The clock is ticking on that.
They're getting a lot of comments. 19 states currently have blanket bans on trans youth participating in sports in their currently lived gender. They're just banned from school sports,
including West Virginia. But the Supreme Court rejected this week an attempt by West Virginia to prevent a 12-year-old trans girl, Becky Pepper Jackson, there she is, from participating in girls' school sports. She challenged the state's Save Women's Sports Act, it's called.
Does that mean only sane women can participate in sports?
Save Women.
Oh, Save Women.
Save Women's Sports Act.
Sorry.
That's all right. Anyway, Becky said she wanted to be on the cross-country team in her middle school in Harrison County. And she was backed by the ACLU and Lambda Legal. And during litigation, she has been allowed to run. She's undergoing puberty delaying treatment and hormone therapy. The lower court judge allowed the law to be enforced against her, but last month, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals blocked West Virginia from enforcing it. The law is being defended by Alliance Defending Freedom. And as you said, Alabama and 20 other states filed briefs supporting West Virginia, as did athletes such as Martina Navratilova.
Well, Becky was participating perfectly happily and easily on the cross-country team for a while before a couple of parents got up in arms and challenged her. And then this whole legal thing started. But she had not been, it was all working fine until these parents stuck their nose in it. So to our great amazement, the Supreme Court has said, we're not going to overturn that intermediate court. She can keep running while this continues to play out in the legal system.
I don't think Justice Clarence Thomas went along with that.
Or Alito, the two of them dissented.
But Thomas, of course, famously this week, exposed for not reporting extravagant gifts for decades. He's a scofflaw, and so is his wife, Ginny. They're scofflaws. And their mega donor friend, Harlan Crow, is a notable collector of Hitler memorabilia, including a signed copy of Mein Kampf by the author.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier for the demise of Clarence Thomas.
Well, if only.
Yeah.
The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that 2 Florida conversion therapists can continue the harmful practice despite bans for minors in Boca Raton and Palm Beach counties. They awarded $175,000 in damages to the quacks, saying that the counties violated their First Amendment rights.
Well, this is an argument that's been going on for a while too, but I'd like to think I have some confidence that that will be overturned because the courts are pretty unanimous on the right of licensing bodies to outlaw conversion therapy. Okay. All right. Well, our new favorite governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, has been up to her new tricks in Arkansas. There she is signing a bill. Now, this is the one that says you can't demand that teachers use preferred pronouns unless your parents have signed a statement approving that. Am I right about that?
Yes, and it includes public schools and colleges and universities. Parental permission for college students? Are they kidding? It's called the Teacher Protection Act to protect instructors from losing their jobs if they don't want to use a name or a pronoun the student uses.
Heaven forbid teachers should respect a student.
So much for Southern hospitality.
Yeah. And then there's North Dakota.
Well, first I'll say the bad thing they did. The governor there, Doug Burgum, did sign bills banning transgender girls and women from school sports, K through 12 and college, even though there are no trans kids in school sports in North Dakota, documented. But he did the legislature, I think we told you this already, they failed to override a veto of a similar measure to the one in Arkansas. And he said, teaching is a hard enough profession without government forcing teachers to take on the role of the pronoun police. But he also signed a bill prohibiting lunch shaming, denying meals provided through federal breakfast and lunch programs to students with unpaid meal balances. And he vetoed a bill infringing on Fargo's method of electing people to local offices, including ranked choice voting. He said, we can't complain about our state's rights being infringed upon when we infringe upon the rights of our own cities to have some local control. By the way, the anti-trans bill in North Dakota was introduced at the behest of the Catholic Conference of Bishops.
Oh, please. Well, there, you see what they're doing in Oklahoma, where they're going to make themselves declared a charter school to be available to students all over the state with state money.
Well, charter schools, religious charter schools, and not just giving them money for schools, because they're already getting some money. It's to teach religious instruction.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
All right. In Florida, bully boy Governor DeSantis is seeking to void that valid agreement by the previous Disney board to give the company say over development. He says he will retaliate with new taxes and tolls against the largest employer in Florida. The Orlando Sentinel condemned DeSantis's foolish, petty, and ultimately selfish vendetta. They urged the governor, whenever you happen to be in Florida, to focus on your actual job.
And Equality Florida put out a notice today, Wednesday, as we're taping, expressing sadness about all the families who are leaving the state or being harassed, and saying that they're not going to express an opinion on whether people should boycott the state. Some will, some won't. But whether you're there or here or anywhere, they're asking for your support for the work they're doing to try to oppose DeSantis.
Yeah, Equality Florida is planning a big walkout of schools and colleges that will be led by students there. But other bills in Florida, the House is taking up a don't say period. It's a bill banning any form of health education until the 6th grade, would prohibit students from asking questions about menstruation, including about their own periods, which often occur before the 6th grade. This comes as the film adaptation of Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, an ode to puberty and menstruation, is going to open this year. Another bill prohibits changing sex on birth certificates, prohibits gender clinical interventions for minors, prohibits insurance coverage for gender clinical interventions, and more. I mean, they're going to run out of things. I wonder what they'll go on to next.
Well, you know, California never runs out of pro-LGBTQ legislation to pass, so I suspect the right wing has its own list. But this all feels like it's escalating everywhere, that the both sides, the right and the left, are just ramping up their anger and their dedication to whatever their values are, whether it is the legislators in Tennessee or all the bills we're talking about in states all over the country. It just feels like the temperature is rising almost as fast as the sea levels, perhaps. There could be a connection there. Panic is setting in, and it just doesn't feel good. I mean, we have a lot of good stories coming up to tell, as well as more bad, and I'm heartened by a lot of it. But man, it just feels like it's getting more and more heated.
Well, and there's been a lot of pushback, especially against, Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk there in Texas, his ruling that the FDA was wrong to approve the drug mifepristone, the abortion drug. Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Washington State is urging the administration and the FDA to ignore the ruling and go on dispensing the drug. Many states are stockpiling the drug. It's been used by millions of people over the past 23 years. The judge brushed aside FDA arguments that a pregnancy is a medical condition that can sometimes be serious and life-threatening, calling it a natural process essential to the perpetuation of human life.
It is more dangerous to give birth than to have an abortion for the woman's health.
Go ahead.
And it has been pointed out that the hormone blockers, the puberty blockers, and hormone antagonists that states are outlawing are also used for cancer, for lots of other medical needs. So I am wondering whether discrimination will set in that they are only going to outlaw them for use as puberty blockers, and they will let other people go ahead and use them for other things, even though technically they're outlawed, period.
Well, to do this, he felt he had to invoke the Comstock Act of 1873, named for an anti-vice crusader. There he is, Anthony Comstock, it prohibits the mailing of contraceptives, lewd writings, there goes the internet, and instruments that could be used in an abortion. So no more condoms in the mail, I guess, or all that kind of stuff. Comstock largely was invalidated by the Griswold decision of the Supreme Court in 1965.
And it's good that after the Texas maniac judge made his ruling against the abortion drugs, the Washington state judge, moments later, issued a ruling restoring availability and access to them, deliberately setting up a fight that could go upwards in the courts and eventually to the Supreme Court. But again, it's just this escalating fight.
Well, that judge is Thomas O. Rice, an Obama appointee, and he was expanding access to the drug, which actually the administration was not really going along with to some extent. But it affects 17 states and the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
In Iowa, Iowa stopped paying for abortions and morning after pills for rape survivors. Previously, these survivors got all kinds of care. Bear the rapist baby is their message. No emergency contraception. Iowa joins the states that have lost their minds. 61% of the people there support abortion rights in Iowa, but now Republicans are after contraception.
All right. And Tennessee, Judge Parker, who put the hold on the anti-drag law for a couple of weeks, has extended that hold to May 26th, so that people will have a chance to argue that more.
All right. And a footnote to Tennessee, all the news there for this week about the expulsion of Representatives Justin Jones. As Jones and as Jones and Justin Pearson were expelled, the student protesters outside the Capitol chanted, "You ban books, you ban drag, kids are still in body bags." That's a very good summary of what.
Very good. Yeah. Well, yeah. And this walkout that's coming of schools and colleges, I think will be very powerful. Meanwhile, these are fun stories of the week. The guy in Tennessee this is, not the fun one. The guy who outed the lieutenant governor for liking pictures of the almost nude young man, his house was shot up.
And the Republican House Speaker, who got rid of the two black representatives, temporarily at least, Cameron Sexton, has been exposed for not legally residing in the district he represents. And State Representative Paul Sherrill there, another Republican monster, who recently suggested bringing back lynching as a form of capital punishment, was removed from the House Criminal Justice Committee, but not removed from the House.
And in Maryland, the guy a guy showed up who was upset about the shooting in Nashville of by the trans person of the 3 dead kids and 3 dead adults. This guy violently threatened HRC, the Human Rights Campaign. He's been arrested, but these lone wolves who get exercised and who often have guns are on the loose.
By the way, an update on the Nashville shooter. The killer did not have a manifesto, as police had said.
Really?
Yes. Just a series of ramblings indicating no clear motive. Republicans have been touting the shootings as a transgender targeting of Christians. In this case, while the killer was, non-binary? Is that what we're saying?
I'm not sure whether she identified as trans or, sorry, you're right, he, or non-binary. But that is, we have no evidence that was anything but incidental to the shooting.
Right. Okay. In Missouri, in the House, their legislature, they're angry at the ACLU lawsuit challenging their bans on many LGBTQ books in libraries. So they voted to defund the state's libraries, removing $4.5 million, as well as costs for diversity initiatives, childcare, and pre-K programs. Defund libraries. Does that sound like a winning slogan? The Missouri bill challenged.
Yes. To the right wing, it does sound like a winning
libraries. The Missouri bill punishes any librarian who provides sexually explicit materials to a student with a $2,000 fine and a year in jail. A lot of state schools have removed 300 titles in response, including many LGBTQ titles and books about the Holocaust and race.
Nonetheless, the ACLU has filed suit in Indiana on behalf of 4 trans youth and their families and doctors against the Indiana law that forbids medical care for trans youth. So that's one way people are fighting back.
Okay, let's give them and kind of relentless with the bad news. In Chicago, in addition to electing progressive Brandon Johnson as mayor, and they're going to get the Democratic convention in 2024.
Yes.
3 more LGBTQ city council candidates won runoffs, bringing their total representation to 9 members of the 50-member council. There they are in all their diversity.
Congratulations to all of them, the re-elected and the newly elected. And then and good news good and bad news in New York State. First of all, the governor has seen the light, and we've been following her appointing of a new chief judge of the state. She appointed someone considered a little too conservative, who was rejected by the state Senate. Well, now she has appointed a much more progressive judge, Rowan Wilson, who was on the court and it will now step up to the chief judge's seat if and when he is approved by the Senate, which is expected. And then her second appointment to fill his seat, I think, is not quite as progressive, but considered within the bounds of acceptability.
Her name is Caitlin Halligan, and she was the Solicitor General of the state. Barack Obama tried to get her on the federal court several times, and it is encouraging that she was blocked by Republicans because she considered gun manufacturers contributed to the public nuisance of illegal guns. But we're not sure about her politics.
Well, we're also, I guess we're more sure that the New York State Republicans in the legislature are going to fail in their latest effort. They have introduced a no trans students in sports in grades 7 through 12. They're a tiny minority in the legislature, so there's no expectation this will go anywhere. But the fact that they wanted to jump on the anti-trans train is discouraging.
You've heard of the group Freedom for All Americans, ostensibly formed in 2015 to pass the Equality Act when Hillary Clinton became president. Well, they've disbanded with $6.2 million in the bank that they have signaled will be distributed to other, quote, legacy LGBTQ advocacy organizations. But Duncan Osborne reports that the real purpose of the group was to push the Utah Compromise federally, watering down the Equality Act with more religious exemptions. They were also working on with state organizations and the Mormon Church to push that compromise in the states. One of the big backers was Paul Singer, a hedge fund manager with a gay son and a libertarian streak, who liked the Utah law.
They had some overlap, I think, with Freedom to Marry when that went out of business because we achieved the right to marry as same-sex couples. Some of those people went and formed this new group, Freedom for All Americans, to try to pass the Equality Act, or as you say, this compromise version, which was not appealing.
By the way, sorry.
Go ahead.
In Tennessee, federal judge Thomas Parker, appointed by Trump, has extended his temporary restraining order against enforcement of Tennessee's drag restrictions until May 26 to allow for full briefing at a trial. His initial restraining order called the law overly broad and vague.
In North Carolina, I think we told you that a Democrat in the legislature converted to Republicanism, and there was some question about why she would do that. It turns out she was offended by what she thought was insults to the American flag or something silly like that. But it gives the Republicans now a veto-proof majority in the legislature so that Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is not going to be able to get very far with vetoing things. And now the Republicans are gearing up to introduce and pass a lot of anti-trans bills in North Carolina.
I get that she's flipped, but it's like she not the same person. I mean, is she going to just vote the other way on all the issues that she ran on?
We don't know for sure, but it looks that way. It looks like, I mean, why else would she shift? But she has a track record of being much more progressive as a Democrat. So it is somewhat confusing and confounding to find her suddenly deciding to be a Republican.
A follow-up on the bombing of the Chesterfield, Ohio Community Church for hosting a drag brunch fundraiser. We told you they arrested a 20-year-old who threw Molotov cocktails at the church. The pastor, we have a picture of him, Jess Peacock, called the violence pitiful. There are people who say, think of the children. Well, children go to this church. We have a preschool. The church asked the owner of a popular local restaurant, Element 41, Paul Mendolera, to cater it. And he'd never done a drag brunch before. They advertised it for over 18s. They sold out 2 seatings. Then his phone started ringing off the hook with threats of violence at the store. Employees were also besieged, calling at their homes, calling them pedophiles, which is the MAGA crowd's favorite word. But this restaurateur would not back down. The church did not back down. The police tried to get him, strong-arm him into canceling the event. And the pastor said, this is sacred work. And when the church held its sold-out drag queen story hour as scheduled, one protester showed up wearing a black mask.
Okay. Nationwide, Budweiser does agreements with various online social media influencers to try to get them to push the brand. And so they created an alliance with a trans woman, Dylan Mulvaney. And just, this is not about putting her in an ad. It's about just getting access to her followers. Except the right wing noticed this, and they have completely freaked out at Budweiser. Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's switched to Coors Light beer, which is very LGBTQ friendly after years ago having some problems. Kid Rock shot up 4 cases of Bud Light with a gun. And then people are talking about switching to other brands, which happen to also be Anheuser-Busch brands. So they're getting nowhere with that. And it's become this whole thing.
Well, George Santos also tweeted, I stand with Riley Gaines against transgender in women's sports in reference to all this. While Budweiser defended making the can from Mulvaney, they give hundreds of thousands of dollars to anti-LGBTQ politicians. Doesn't that make you happy, Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yeah, she better watch out. The right wing is going to shoot themselves in the foot with decisions like that.
Well, let's go to San Francisco, where they staged a drag up fight back march on Saturday, drawing thousands to protest all the anti-LGBTQ legislation, which is sweeping the red states. What a march.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see people out in the streets. I think that's what's been missing. There's all this online stuff. There's great legal work going on. People are lobbying legislatures, but you got to get people out in the streets. And I will refer you again to the great documentary I saw a couple of weeks ago on PBS, The Movement and the Monster. The Moratorium and the Monster. It was about Nixon in 69 and people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the street stopping the Vietnam War by getting out there. And that's what we need. So San Francisco, yes. West Hollywood, same thing. They also got out in the streets. There they are.
They had 40 groups endorsing this. It was organized by the LGBT Center.
Thousands of people in both cities.
And Kerry Colby, a RuPaul's Drag Race alum, told the crowd, "This is not just a fun little moment to gather and meet with friends. This is our life."
Yeah. And thank you to the new governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who signed the Trans Health Equity Act for Maryland, which extends Medicaid coverage to trans people needing medical support.
It was already covered, but there were a lot of hoops to jump through, which you didn't have to do with private insurance companies. So they fixed that.
Great.
In Llano County, Texas.
Llano, Texas.
Llano, Texas. Officials are meeting this week to decide whether to close their public library and terminate all employees after a federal judge, Robert Pittman, ordered that just 12 books that had been removed be returned to the stacks. The meeting is on Thursday. The defendants in the case appealed the judgment to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Sorry to report that the legislature of Kansas has overridden the governor's veto of their trans sports ban. Kansas's legislature is heavily Republican, so it was a lovely gesture by the governor, but not getting far enough. Also, big fight in Franklin, Tennessee over their Pride Fest. They've done it peacefully and easily for 2 years, but now that the temperature is rising, there's one of their, I guess, last year's. The right wing came out in huge numbers to local city council hearing. They've had a couple of hearings on whether or not to give a permit for this year. They're all scared about drag shows and kids. Yes, you can see how dangerous that looks there. And the city council ended up tying in their vote 4-4 about whether to issue a permit for the drag fest. But the mayor cast the deciding vote to give the permit for the Pride Fest because he's afraid that they're going to run into legal problems of denying free speech. So the Pride Fest people have promised not to do a drag show and to have a calmer thing, and so they're going ahead. I've just been reminded by a loyal viewer that the documentary's name is The Movement and the Madman. Look it up. It's excellent.
Okay. And finishing up on Franklin, the council there deferred a vote on a public decency policy to April 26th. It would ban not just nudity and sexually suggestive behavior in sex acts, but offensive displays of affection.
That's an interesting one. Come to New York. We have a lot of offensive displays of affection here.
In Indiana, a federal judge ruled that an orchestra teacher in Brownsburg High School could not use his religion as an excuse to violate school policy and misgender trans students who are required to, as it is, submit written consent from a doctor and a parent to be referred to by their correct names and pronouns. This guy, John Kluge, said his God requires him to call students by their birth names, calls being trans a dangerous lifestyle. At first, the administration let him just refer to students by their last names, but he reverted to first names for the cisgender students and avoided calling the trans students at all, which
he couldn't help himself. Back to Florida, where a lawyer representing victims of child abuse has now been arrested because they found he had oodles of child porn on his home computer. The cops came and broke down the door of his home to get in and get him. So you think we're bad.
As are the Republicans in Wisconsin. Many are ready to impeach the new high court judge, who hasn't even taken office, Janet Protasewicz. Before she takes office and can vote, she will be wanting to vote to uphold reproductive rights and fix the state's gerrymandered districts.
Another bulletin from our loyal viewer, Justin Pearson, has been reinstated in the Tennessee legislature. So they're both back now. Let's see what good trouble they can get up to.
In D.C., the organizer of Boston's anti-gay straight pride event, Mark Sahady, 48, was indicted on felony obstruction charges for his role in the January 6th insurrection. He's the vice president of Super Happy Fun America that held the Straight Pride event, a group opposing what they call gender madness and dedicated to defeating cultural Marxism. He faces a 20-year sentence, which is not super fun.
Well, which brings us, I guess, to the Freedom March founder, Jeffrey McCall, who was an ex-gay, but now he's an ex-gay. He's gone back to his drag identity, I guess, Scarlet. There he is on the left in his straighter appearance, and he was a big supporter of conversion therapy. But now he's decided, no, I guess that doesn't work, and he's back to being Scarlet.
He's asking for compassion and understanding.
Well, fine. I'm happy to give you compassion and understanding. It'd be nice if you gave other people compassion and understanding.
All right.
But my favorite, the best compassion and understanding story of the week is from Pennsylvania, where the Lidditz Moravian congregation apologized to the public for trying to stop the Lidditz Chooses Love Pride event in a local park. They said, "We're sorry we believed the lies that LGBTQ people were pedophiles. Please forgive us and please talk with us." I thought that was very moving.
Yes, they initially objected to political statements and drag performances at past Pride events. Now they say they've learned that not all drag is adult-oriented nor inherently sexual. They've also learned that promoting a social justice agenda does not run afoul of the IRS ban on political activity on tax-exempt groups. They've learned something.
Isn't it nice when people learn something?
Shocking.
Yeah. All right. Well, a couple of violence stories. In New York City, a young man was just walking up 10th Avenue and was called a homophobic slur at 43rd Street. He confronted the group that was slurring him, and they stabbed him. Thank you. And then also in New York, a trans model, Tommy Playboy Maxwell, 23 years old, was found dead on the subway tracks. Unclear whether they were pushed, fell, jumped, not known, but a locally well-known model.
They described themselves as misunderstood, misfit model, movement artist, youth advocate. All right, some of the other people that we lost this week, not to violence, Raghavan Iyer, who got America to give Indian cooking a try at home, has died at 61 of cancer, survived by Terry Erickson, his partner of 41 years. An immigrant from Mumbai, Iyer went to Minnesota for a hospitality management program when he was 21, met Erickson there and and became a very famous cookbook author, consulted for restaurants, taught it all over the world. His first book was Betty Crocker's Indian Home Cooking.
And also, he worked with the Betty Crocker people to be allowed to do that. And they were skeptical at first. And then he made them an Indian meal and they liked it. So they said, okay.
Also survived by his son, Robert.
Yes. And in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a trans pioneer and activist, Wendy Miller, 75 years old, also had a framing business. You can see her standing outside it there. She was the co-founder of the Pittsburgh Transsexual Support Group, which she started in 1995. And she went on the Ricky Lake show a year later in 96 with her son to discuss the whole family dynamic of having a trans parent. In 97, she helped get Pittsburgh to add gender identity and expression as a protected category to the human rights law there.
And Joanne Borden was a leading trans activist on Long Island. She's died at the age of 97, repeatedly fought at the Nassau County Legislature for LGBTQ rights, appearing before them no less than 72 times.
Wow.
Though Nassau, my home county where I'm from, never came through. But New York State did pass the Gender Identity Non-Discrimination Act. She was the author of Transgender Complete, a virtual handbook, and the Transgender Monologues. She was a widow survived by 2 children and 4 grandchildren, a veteran of World War II. She was an industrial engineering consultant and president of 2 engineering societies. What a pioneer.
What a great life. And we also lost Sharon Malhero, co-founder of One Iowa, the activist group in Iowa, and was involved in Iowa becoming the 3rd state, long before New York, to legalize same-sex marriage. So she is mourned by the community in Iowa.
And we lost James Bowman. Can we talk about him now? Yes.
Sure.
A prominent British countertenor has died at the age of 81. His creation of the voice of Apollo in Benjamin Britten's Death in Venice in 1973 made his name, creating a gender-ambiguous tone that captured the god's essence, survived by Terry Winwood. He also
now that's a picture of him on the right in Benjamin Britten's Midsummer Night's Dream. He had not thought about auditioning for this. This was his first, one of his first roles. He said, a friend came up from London and told me that Benjamin Britten was holding auditions. This is sort of a fairy story. I'd never done anything on stage in my life, but I wrote to Britten and said, I think I'm eminently suited to the role of Oberon.
And the person on the left there was Mark Rylance, the famous actor.
I knew that you could barely hear the people who had sung the part before, so I went to Covent Garden and I made a big noise and socked them between the eyeballs, and it worked. The next thing I knew, I was on tour.
Unknowingly, I heard him. He used to sing in the choir at the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace, where I sometimes go at Christmas time, and he was part of that choir.
Well, he really escalated the public prominence of countertenors who were sort of quiet before, but he really made it as a role. All right. International.
Speaking of Benjamin Britten, I'm going to see a play that he's a character in at 59's 59th. The Habit of Art is coming there in May.
Okay. Well, I would warn you not to go to Uganda. Go to 59th, but don't go to Uganda. We're waiting to see whether President Museveni will sign the death to gays bill.
Well,
he says homosexuality is a danger to procreation of the human race. Where has he been for the last 50 years? We got rid of that shibboleth a long time ago.
He said Africa should provide the lead to save the world from this degeneracy decadence.
And of course, this is all promoted by U.S. evangelists who go to Africa and throw around all these lies to scare people and then get these bills passed. He wants the right wing to hold a conference strategizing about Africa saving the world, and he may very well sign this bill.
And a pair of popular Russia-based LGBT bloggers have been arrested in Russia for violating the law against gay propaganda. Kaio Su, a Chinese citizen, and his partner, Gela Gogishvili, an ethnic Georgian who is a Russian citizen, they document their life as an openly gay non-Slavic couple living in Russia on their popular social media channels, including TikTok and YouTube, and they face a 50,000 ruble fine, $628, or arrest. And the Chinese guy faces deportation from Russia. They've been targeted by an anti-gay activist and have been facing death threats and harassment. Russia has expanded the law to outlaw virtually all public expression and depictions of LGBTQ relationships and life.
In Tunisia, Black LGBTQ refugees in refugee camps have been attacked by mobs and by the cops who take a look at their official UN Human Rights Commission documents and tear them up and claim that they've been falsified. So the population of Black African LGBTQ refugees who are in the more Arab states of Tunisia, et cetera, are under attack and terrified.
In the United Kingdom, an all trans men and transmasculine soccer team, they call it football, played against a cisgender men's team for the first time in European history. Truk United FC, the trans team, lost to Dulwich 8-1, but they made history, including on their squad was actor Ash Palmis. I'm sorry, I mispronounced the name. His name is Ash, of this TV series Emmerdale, the first trans actor on that TV soap. There is also a Truk women's team.
Well, this team of transmasculine men was not a practice team. They were very ad hoc. They were thrown together at the last minute. People came from all over the country to be on this team. So the fact that they lost to a professional team should not be a huge surprise. And I'm sure once they get a little more practice in, they'll do better. Also in the UK, at a regular Premier League game, the Wolves were hosting Chelsea. The crowd was into their usual homophobic chants. 3 men ages 21, 24, and 32 were arrested after being warned to stop and refusing to stop. So in regular professional soccer, not good.
Germany and France have joined 13 other EU nations suing Hungary over its anti-LGBTQ law, a suit that was filed last July. Hungary's Child Protection Act bans LGBTQ content in the media and restricts how you talk about it in the schools. It passed in 2021. The Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, said Hungary has no business being in the European Union anymore.
LGBTQ rights uniting other members of the European Union. Estonia is working out a plan to legalize same-sex marriage. That would make them the first ex-Soviet republic to do so. Very exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really have any AIDS news, but I do want to.
I got one thing.
Well, I do want to point out that people are acting as if COVID is over. An old man today came up, older than me even, and said, "Why are you still wearing a mask?" Only 17% of Americans have gotten a COVID booster. Deaths are down, but still 1,773 a week. We've lost over 1 million people so far. And in New York City, they report that life expectancy has gone down 5 years as a result.
I have had 2 separate friends recently tell me that they had had big bouts with COVID in the last couple of weeks. Okay. So I'm aware it is out there, and you should be too. But the other thing is that Mpox or monkeypox is also not over. We thought that had disappeared. But they now have a cohort of men in France who have tested positive for monkeypox. Half of them were vaccinated. So that's not good news. Wow. But especially men who are HIV positive, who seem to have less resistance. So they're looking at, is this a mutation? Is that why the vaccinations are not working well, or were they under-vaccinated? So you might consider, if you haven't been vaccinated, to get vaccinated for Mpox.
Okay. In entertainment news, Tom Daley and Dustin Lance Black announced that they have a second son, Phoenix Rose, pictured with their first son, Robbie. They're always very good about never showing the kids' faces in their
It always astonishes me that people do that, because could you really recognize a baby?
Well,
I guess so.
I have a correction from last week. I said Coleman Domingo had joined the cast of Fat Ham on Broadway. No, he hosted a Juicy Disco celebration of the Pulitzer Prize winning comedy ahead of its opening on April 12th. I I'm seeing it this weekend with our friend Chris Cooper.
Okay. And Monique has a new comedy special on Netflix. I have to say, I have rarely seen anything so profane as that. Oh my God. Every
Why?
word, every other word is either MFer or the N word or something. It is just relentless.
Did you like it?
Did I what?
Like it.
Not particularly, but it's not up to me. It's called My Name is Monique, and main theme here, eventually in this special, is about her discussing her sexual orientation and how she came to realize that she had always been attracted to women and wanted to be with women, but she was now on her third marriage. She's been criticized a lot. She, at one point, had an open marriage with one of her husbands and took a lot of flack for that. She took a lot of flack for not shaving her legs, too. But she talks about how she struggled and struggled and struggled and finally said to her third husband, who she truly loves and who she describes as the sweetest, nicest, most loving guy, I want to be with another woman sexually. And he says, me too. But she then sort of throws in this thing about, yeah, I really want a woman to perform oral sex on me, but I'm not doing it to her.
Oh, wow.
I hate that.
Not a good advertisement.
No. So, take a look if you're interested, but you're not going to come away from it being totally thrilled.
The Guggenheim Fellowships have been announced, a whole slew of them. And among them in the fiction category are gay novelist and artist James Hannaham, the author of God Says No, and our friend Jacqueline Woodson, who writes books for children and adolescents and an autobiography, Brown Girl Dreaming, and best known for Miracle's Boy and a raft of Newbery-honored titles exploring issues of gender, class, and race.
And our neighbor, Wayne Kestenbaum, author of 20 books, poet, writer, artist, best known for writing The Queen's Throat about gay men and opera, and the book Humiliation, which is about that, and a biography of Andy Warhol, and works about Jackie Onassis, and teaches at the CUNY Grad Center. Congratulations to all of them.
Okay, Fenton Bailey, the out-gay creator of RuPaul's Drag Race with Randy Barbato, has, with their World of Wonder production company and the ACLU, created the Drag Defense Fund to combat the rise of all these anti-LGBTQ laws and threats up against the power of the Republican Party. Bailey wants to figure out how to make Drag Race come to Uganda, Russia, and Iran.
Please.
Says he was violently bullied as a sissy boy, but did not retreat or conform because he knew and liked who he was. Bailey quotes RuPaul's most famous line, "We're all born naked and the rest is drag."
We have only a little over a minute. Performance Space here in New York is going to stage a celebrity reading of excerpts from Urvashi Vad's Virtual Equality. Look that up to attend. And the Met Opera is currently performing a new opera by the same librettist who did Fire Up in My Bones,
Yep.
Charles Blow thing. Well, this is Champion, about Emil Griffith, the boxer, who was gay and who was also famous for being insulted with fag bashing at way into a fight, and then got into the ring and pummeled this fag bashing opponent so badly that he killed him, not on purpose.
Benny Perrette.
And soprano Stephanie Blythe makes a cameo appearance as the lesbian owner of a gay bar. It's gotten pretty good reviews.
There'll be a live simulcast on April 29th for that. We'll tell you about the Urvashi Vad thing in our email, along with the Rainbow Book Fair.
Yes, the Rainbow Book Fair next weekend at the center, the return of the Rainbow Book Fair, and we will return next week. Thank you.